right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm joined today by Rodrigo Blankenship. Rod, thank you so much for taking some time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. So I know we talked last week. You were going to the G Day game this past Saturday. What was your initial impression of the team and how did everything go?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the team this year. G Day was a lot of fun. Got to interact with some great Dogs fans. I actually did a little pregame and postgame coverage with Dog Nation, one of the local media outlets, and so it's always a great time when you get to go back to Athens and just take it all in all over again. And yeah, I'm really excited about the team this year. I think that the running back room is going to be really strong. Got some big time playmakers in that room: Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, Phillips, Dante Dowdle transferred in from Kentucky. A lot of great talent in the running back room, and I think the tight ends are really deep as well, and are going to be really exciting to watch as they develop and grow this year. So there's a lot of excitement around the team. Team's looking really good. Defense is looking really strong as well. We've got a lot of production coming back in some really important places on both sides. So I expect big things for the Dogs this year.
Good, good. And of course, got Gunner coming back, and we always have a lot of talent on the defensive side. I
Mhm.
didn't have this necessarily on the script, but I'm curious what your thoughts are because when you were at Georgia, obviously NIL was not a thing, and it's really
Mhm.
changed the landscape the past few years. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on NIL and how it shifted the landscape of college football.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it has spread the wealth around, in a manner that we have never really seen to this extent. I think that, if
Yeah.
you think back to the like early mid 2000s where the SEC just dominated college football, you've got Alabama, LSU, Florida, whatever the case may be, just consolidating a lot of the top recruits. And, because there were restrictions on the transfer portal and restrictions, this was pre NIL, basically those recruits are locked in. And so there really was a developmental side to all of these programs where you have guys that sit and wait in the wings for a couple years, and then when it's their time to shine, they ball out. And that's why teams were able to have so much success. And some programs were not able to have that much success because they can't attract these recruits. And so now with NIL, you have the opportunity to pay players, and so now it really levels the playing field, where you have a program like Indiana, who has been at the bottom of the college football barrel for so long. Well, now you have a donor like Mark Cuban who can pour millions of dollars into the program, and they're able to go out and offer some of these really talented recruits money to come and play. And so now you have players going to programs that you never would have expected them to go to before, and it's
Hmm.
spread the wealth around in a manner that we've never seen. Coach Smart has, constantly talked about how depth is not what it used to be, and the talent is just spread so thin where it's like, well, now when you get to those twos and threes on the depth chart, there is a little bit more of a drop off than what you're used to seeing in years past. So the wealth is getting spread. I think it's good for college football because it gives programs like Indiana, other programs who previously had struggled, an opportunity to be at the forefront, and you get to see some new programs rise to the top. But I also think that it is a little bit detrimental because student athletes now make education even less of a priority than it probably was for a lot of guys before, where now when you want,
That's true.
previously you had guys go to a school for tradition and for playing time and for the opportunity to win a championship, and then they think about education. Well, now all of those priorities just kind of get bumped one rung further down on the list because now, money is at the top of a lot of guys' list. And so it kind of takes away some of that purity that we used to have with college football.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're right. I mean, Saban would stack 4 and 5 star recruits 3 deep and just let them develop for 3 years. And you got a guy you've never heard of, and he comes out his junior year as an All American now. And
Mhm.
Kirby was doing the same thing. LSU, they were stacking talent so deep and developing it. And to your point, now a 5 star doesn't want to sit and wait for 3 years when Indiana is going to pay him a few $1 million to go play. So it
Mhm.
definitely has shifted the landscape. Um, so, Rod, you started playing football at what age?
About 10 years old. It was
Okay.
this. It was the summer between fourth and fifth grade. I had played soccer, from a very young age, probably from about 3 to 4 years old. I played soccer, and my dad had noticed that I had a pretty strong leg while I was playing soccer. And so that summer between fourth and fifth grade, and I think I was about either 10 or 11. He said, "Hey, let's see if you can kick a football." And so we went out to a local practice field, got one of those rubber Baden footballs, a 2-inch block, the little red tripod sticks from Wilson, and teed up an extra point. And he said, "Here, just kick this ball kind of like how you would kick a free kick, and let's see what happens. And I kicked it and sailed through the uprights with no previous coaching or instruction. And I think that a light bulb kind of went off in his head, like, oh man, there could be something there. Like there's a lot of potential that could be here. And
Yeah.
so it just kind of took off from there. That following summer, I went to my first camp to start getting proper instruction, and we never looked back.
So growing up, like middle school, high school, was soccer your primary sport, or did football become your primary sport growing up?
By the time I got to high school, I think that I had realized that there would be more of a future in football. And
Hmm.
so a lot of my efforts as far as recruiting goes and, trying to take the next step towards college was all put into football. I still loved
Okay.
soccer and I still dedicated an equal amount of time to it. Each year I still played for the high school team each year, freshman through senior year. But as far as like the recruiting and looking towards the future, football had become the priority.
Okay. At what point would you say the light bulb went off and you realized, like, hey, I'm not just a high school kicker. I have a God given ability and could potentially play at the next level? At what point did that light bulb go off for you?
Um, I think it probably went off a little earlier in my career. I think it was probably like summer going into eighth grade.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
and I would go to college camps pretty much every summer, starting with the summer that I was going into the seventh grade. And so I guess this was my second year of going to college camps. And I think I was at the University of Georgia camp as a rising eighth grader. We would do like a charting session in the morning, and then we would have a break
Hmm.
for lunch, and then you would come back in the afternoon and have competitions. And the competitions would be grouped based on how you performed in the charting in the morning. And so I believe it was as a rising eighth grader, I crushed it during the charting. And so the coaches put me into a high school group for the rising ninth and 10th graders, and I was a rising eighth grader. They put me in the rising ninth and 10th grade group for the field goal and kickoff competition, and I won both of those as a rising eighth grader. So I was beating guys that were 1 and 2 years older than me. And so I think that it was probably that summer, maybe not specifically that camp, but probably that summer when I was a rising eighth grader and was noticing that I was beating other athletes that were 1 or 2 or 3 years older than me at the same game. That's
Yeah.
when I think it really hit me like, okay, I'm ahead of the curve here. Like there is serious potential where, I could really make something out of this.
Yeah. And you started out your career at Georgia as a walk on. Is that correct?
That is correct. 2015,
Did,
I was a walk on with Coach Richt. Yeah.
okay. So did you go like as a preferred walk on, or were you recruited going in? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I was a preferred walk on.
Okay.
I had a couple of scholarship offers to some other programs. My first scholarship offer, full ride, was actually from UAB, University of Alabama Birmingham.
Mhm.
Funny enough, I live about 20 minutes from there now, um, and uh, and so I had some other scholarship offers to programs of that level. I had a couple of preferred walk on offers as well. One from the University of Georgia, one from Mississippi State, and a couple of other programs. Um, but yeah, I was a preferred walk on here. And so in 2015, I came in and I backed up Marshall Morgan, as a field goal
Hmm.
and kickoff guy all year. I also potentially could have gone in as a punter had we, needed my services. Colin Barber was our starting punter that year. But I took two's reps as our punter for all of preseason camp and for a good portion of the regular season as well. So just a year to learn and gain experience and see how the program works and see how to be a college athlete.
And then that next year, 2016, was when Kirby took over as head coach,
Yes, Coach Rick left at
right?
the end of the 2015 season to head to Miami.
Mhm.
Coach Smart came in 2016, and we took off from there. It was
Yep.
you kind of it's kind of like a freshman year all over again because you've got a new head coach. Most of the coaching staff, that he brought in was new as well, and so you've got new coaches trying to learn the names of players all over again. So you kind of hit the reset button there in 2016. I walked on. I was a walk on again during the 2016
Hmm.
season, and then finally earned a scholarship right at the beginning of the 2017 season.
And I remember when he announced the scholarship and the whole team went crazy. It was a big deal. I remember that. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was a really cool
So,
moment up at Notre Dame.
it, yeah, 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 I remember that. That was awesome. So, Rod, I don't know if you grew up a Georgia fan. I grew up, my dad went to Georgia. So, from the time I'm 4 or 5 years old, I'm working in the yard with my dad on Saturdays and we're listening to Georgia games on the radio. I remember the Larry Munson calls and everything. And there's been a lot of great players over the past couple decades. I mean, you have Matthew Stafford, Noshawn Marino, AJ Green, Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb, so many great players, Roquan Smith.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue that Rodrigo Blankenship is the most beloved player to put on the uniform in the last 20 or 30 years. What was it about you that made the fans gravitate toward you so much? Was it the look? Was it the kicker? I mean, what was it? Because so many kickers come through SEC programs and they're forgotten, but you are still one of the most memorable players. What do you think it was about you that made the fans gravitate to you so much?
Well, I think the first thing is being good at what you do. I think
Yeah.
that, a lot of times memorable players are memorable because they're really good at what they do. I mean, all the guys that you just
Mm-hmm.
listed off are exceptional players. Matthew Stafford
Yeah.
comes through, number one overall draft pick, won a Super Bowl a few years ago. Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, incredible running backs. Todd Gurley, incredible. Roquan Smith, top 10 draft pick, goes on to do great things in the NFL. So I think that that's the first thing is I was really good at, at kicking footballs through the uprights. So I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
big component to it. And I think the other main factor is just, me being myself, me being accessible, me being friendly, it's just who I am. Students would see me around campus, ask to take pictures after class and, name their dog after me or something like that, whatever the case may be. It's just trying to be myself, trying to be humble, trying to be friendly and accessible. And, you know, I think that just lends itself to fans gravitating towards me. They see that I'm, a genuine and authentic person. And I think that authenticity goes a long way these days.
It does. And even still, when you go back, I mean, you're greeted with a standing ovation. Did you get recognized on the field this past Saturday?
I did not get recognized on the field at G Day, but I definitely got recognized everywhere else that I went, whether it be at the bookstore for the pregame, postgame show, or walking through the concourse to get up to my seats during the game.
Hmm.
Driving around to go get a meal with my wife the day before, whatever the case may be. I definitely got recognized pretty much everywhere else.
Yeah. It's always fun going back to Athens. I think I'm going back for a concert this weekend. I don't go enough, but it's always fun to go back.
Oh yeah, it's always a great time.
Um, it is. Yeah. So, Rod, you had a lot of memorable kicks in your career at Georgia, and I think I know the answer to this, but what would you say your most memorable kick as a Bulldog was?
Um, it's tough to say. There's three or four that come to mind pretty immediately.
Hmm.
One of them would be the kick at halftime of the Rose Bowl in the
Yeah, that
college
was
football playoff
broadcast.
semifinal.
Hmm.
Also, the in the following game in the national championship in overtime, kicked a 51
Yeah.
yarder to take the lead against Alabama in that national championship game. That is another very memorable one for me personally. I also
Yeah.
think about I had a game winner at the buzzer against Kentucky in 2016, the first year I actually took over kicking for the team, and
Hmm.
had the subsequent helmet interview, right afterwards. That was another very memorable one. And then I think the other one that comes to mind is my senior year, 2019, against Texas A&M on senior night, kicking the field goal that would give me the Georgia school record for most points in a career. So the third field goal that
Yeah.
I had made in that game, and that one gave me the record. So all those kicks come to mind. I kind of cycle back and forth depending on the mood, which one is my most memorable.
Yeah. Yeah, they were all huge kicks. That Rose Bowl kick was incredible. I mean, that completely tilted the momentum of the game and shifted it back to us. And what a game that was to be a part of.
Yeah, that was a crazy game. We definitely needed a little bit of a spark right there at the end of the half because Baker Mayfield had just caught a touchdown pass right
Yeah.
before on like the Philly special. Basically, they ran like a Philly special.
Hmm.
He caught that touchdown. They went up by 17, I believe, and we were
Yeah.
definitely on our heels. So I don't think we'd given up more than 17 points to anybody all
No
season.
doubt.
And then
Hmm.
they had 17 on us in just the first half. So we definitely needed a little bit of a spark. And sure enough, the second half we turned it around and Dogs win.
Yeah, what a game. And you kicked, what was it, 55-yard field goal?
Yeah, 55 right there at the end of the half.
Incredible. Yeah, what a game. That's one you'll never forget.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you did not win a national championship. You of course, the one we don't want to talk about, the Alabama loss in 2017. But
Mhm.
you and Chubb and Michelle and all those guys, Roquan, you guys laid the foundation for what became a dynasty with the next class. Talk a little bit about that, just the culture that you guys built with Coach Smart those first 3 or 4 years, and how that transitioned to ultimately, really a dynasty a few years later.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, like to think that I was part of, like you said, laying the foundation for things to come. Um, and Coach Smart definitely brings a certain intensity to practice and to meetings and to workouts every single day that, I would argue is unmatched by any other coach in college football. Now, maybe in the last couple
Mhm.
years, he's had to dial it back a little bit, years and years of college football and the stress of, tight games and recruiting and what have you, definitely wears on you a little bit. But he brings unmatched intensity and focus every single day, and I think that trickles down to the locker room. It trickles down to all of the players, and you have to be at your best every single day when you step out on the field, when you step into the meeting room, when you step into the classroom, whatever the case may be. You're expected to be at your best, and I think that expectation for for performance and your mindset and your attitude, has revealed itself in the form of back-to-back national championships a couple years ago, and now Georgia is one of the most prolific programs in college football. Back-to-back
Mhm.
SEC champions in 24 and 25, trips to the playoffs with first-round buys. Everyone has Georgia circled on their calendar when they play the Dogs every year, and it's just a testament
Absolutely.
to the culture that Coach Smart has built, the expectations that Coach Smart has built for this program, and the players that are hungry to meet those expectations are the ones that come to Georgia and do really well here.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a lot of great players now, but I believe that the teams that won the national championship were standing on the shoulders of guys like you who established the culture under Coach Smart that ultimately led to back-to-back national championships and what we would call now, a powerhouse program in the country.
Yeah. I think about a moment that we had in the 2021 national championship game that was played in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. I was
Hmm.
playing for the Colts at the time, and so I was obviously at the game. And I remember being on the sidelines, watched Keely Ringo get that pick six to seal the game. Nolan Smith gets that sack to end the
Hmm.
game, and start running out onto the field, and everybody's going crazy, running around the field, hog wild. The confetti's flying. All the victory sounds are playing, and I remember just in the middle of the madness, Coach Smart came up to me and he said, Rod, I'm so sorry that I couldn't give this to you. He said, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry that I wasn't ready to be a national championship winning coach at the time. And I want you to know that this national championship is for you as much as it is for all these guys out here on this field tonight. And, it's
Wow.
like you said, it was just being a part of things to come, even though we weren't able to experience it for ourselves. Just the fact that we get to see so many other athletes following our footsteps and get to reach the pinnacle was a really rewarding experience.
Yeah. That's an awesome moment with Coach Smart.
Yeah.
So that kind of tees me up for my next question, Rod. A lot of people see Coach Smart on the sidelines. They see some of the antics. They see him in the interviews at the press conference. But tell people, for those that have never been around Coach Smart, tell people what he's really like behind the scenes as a coach, how intense he is. Pull the curtain back a little bit and give people an idea of who Kirby Smart really is behind closed doors.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you see, how he is on the sidelines. You see, him jumping 4 feet in the air as his player gets an interception. He's almost jumping up with the player to go up and pick it
Yeah.
off. And so you see that on the sidelines. But I think that when you're off the practice field, when you're not in meetings anymore, he's just another one of us. He's
Hmm.
just another guy who loves football, and you can see that. He'll come sit down with players now that we have Bones, the football only dining hall in the facility. Players can go in and they'll eat lunch or they'll eat dinner, and Coach Smart will come in and just chat it up.
Hmm.
with the guys as you're eating. And so, he's just another one of the guys when you're not in meetings, when you're, not on the field. And so I think a lot of people don't necessarily see that side of him. You only see the hyper energetic, and focused and animated and intense person that he is on the sidelines. But, that speaks to him as a coach. When it's time to work, it's time to work. And,
Yeah.
he puts the game face on. He's locked in. He's dialed in at meetings. Expect the absolute best. Expect everybody to be focused and dialed into meetings, out on the practice field, watching film, at the hotel the night before the game. There's a certain expectation of focus and professionalism. And so when it's time to lock in, he's locked in, and he expects everyone else to lock in as well. So that's kind of the side
Yeah.
that you see, but a lot of people don't see that he's just a normal guy who loves football. He's a husband, he's a father, he's just a great man off of the field. And so you don't always get to see the more casual, turned off side of Coach Smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And in today's environment, as a head coach, you have to wear a lot of different hats.
Mm-hmm.
What trait do you think sets Coach Smart out above all the other coaches, or what is his number one trait that makes him so successful? Obviously, you have to recruit, you have to develop, you have to align a really good coaching staff together. What is his most powerful trait as a coach?
I think that his most powerful trait is probably consistency. I think
Hmm.
that you would be hard pressed to find another program or another head coach who has positioned his program to be as successful on a consistent basis as Coach Smart has with the University of Georgia. I mean, there are some
Yeah.
other schools that have, done really well for a couple years, and then, they kind of fall off. They slip a little bit. I think about Clemson in the mid 2010s,
Hmm.
2015 to 2018. Clemson is at the top, and, now Clemson has started to slip a little bit, where they haven't been as consistent in recent years. Ohio State obviously winning a national championship. They've gone back to the playoffs last year, but they have also struggled, especially against their rival in Michigan.
Hmm.
So I think that when you look at who has been the most consistently excellent program in college football, it's University of Georgia, and I think that that is a testament to Coach Smart's abilities as a coach, just all encompassing. He is most consistently, an incredible recruiter, most consistent game day coach in terms of creating a game
Hmm.
plan for the defense, for the offense, managing the game in terms of timeouts, clock management, situational awareness, all of those things. I think that he is the most consistent coach in college football, and that has allowed the program to achieve excellence more consistently than any other team.
Yeah. He's also done an incredible job assembling his staff. If you look at a lot of the guys on his staff, they've been there for years since the beginning. I mean, Glenn Schumann, was my linebacker coach. He's the defensive coordinator now, but he's been there since the start.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he's had head coaching opportunities. Coach Sinclair is still there. Coach Hartley's been there a long time. So not only has he assembled a really good staff, but he's doing something to make them want to stay. He's made the coaches buy into the program as well, which is really unusual in today's college football environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really it's really cool to see, so many of the coaches that want to stick around. Obviously he hasn't been able to keep hold of everybody. Coach
Yeah.
Lanning now head coach at Oregon. Coach Pittman for a time was the head coach at Arkansas. Coach Munkin, our offensive coordinator, now is going to be the new head coach for the Cleveland Browns. So he's gone off to
Hmm.
do incredible things in his career as well. So, it's unfortunate that you can't keep all of the pieces together, but usually that's just a sign that your program is successful. When you have other teams, whether it be college or pro, that want your coaches, it's because you're doing something right. So, it's a
Yeah.
testament to the staff that he's, able to build. And then, as you said, just being able to continuously put together a great coaching staff. When you have coaches that leave, being able to either promote the right guys to fill those positions or go out and find new guys outside the program to bring in and replace them. He's done an incredible job with that as well, to just consistently maintain a great staff year after year.
Yeah, no doubt. Rod, I want to list a few of your accolades in college, and you were a very decorated kicker. You won the Lou Groza Award in 2019, which is the nation's top kicker. You were an All American in 2019 as well. You were All SEC in 2018 and 2019, and you alluded to this earlier against Texas A&M. You were Georgia's all-time scoring leader at 440 points. You also have the school record with 184 consecutive PATs. um, academic service awards throughout your career. And these are a lot of incredible accolades. Which of these would you say was the most meaningful to you as a player?
Um, I think it would be easy to point to the Groza, just because
Yeah,
that is the award given to the best kicker in college football, and kickers every year, who have aspirations of being the best, potentially going on to the NFL, would like to think that they'd be willing or they'd be capable of winning that award at some point in their career. But I think the one that I am the most proud of would actually be that I was a finalist for the Campbell Award. And the Campbell Award is colloquially known as the academic Heisman. So it is given to a student athlete who, is great on the field, but also is great in the classroom. And
hmm,
education is always something that I have prioritized. Education is a big part of the reason why I ultimately decided to come to University of Georgia as a preferred walk-on over some other schools that I could have gone to on full scholarship, because I want to
yeah,
get into sports journalism and sports broadcast at some point in my life. And University of Georgia has one of the best journalism schools in the country, and Grady College. So, I've always prided myself on education and making sure that I did what I needed to do in the classroom. And so the fact that I was a finalist for the Campbell Award, which recognizes both performance and academic success, I think is, the accolade or acknowledgement that I'm the most proud of.
yeah. It's a tremendous honor to even be in consideration for that. So, Rod, after college, you go on to kick for the Colts for a while, and then you also kick for the Cardinals for a little while. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you had injury. You were plagued with injuries for a couple years. I know you're trying to get back in the NFL right now. Are there any teams you look at? And obviously, I know you would love to kick on any NFL team, but are there any teams you look at right now and think, man, I'd be a really good fit there, or I would really like to play for that team?
I'm not going to be too picky. I know it's incredibly difficult to kick in the NFL, and
Yeah.
going through the pre-draft process is, quite intense and quite grueling. You're going to go, if you're lucky enough to go to the Senior Bowl, you go to the Senior Bowl and you kick in front of coaches for a week there, and you're going to have sit-down interviews with coaches there. If you're invited to the Combine, you're going to have a very similar process there. You're also going to be sleep deprived because they keep you up very late at night doing interviews and testing, and so you get very little sleep at the Combine, performing more interviews, medical testing, on-field performance there. Individual workouts, you may have those. The year that I came out, 2020, obviously we had COVID going around, and so a lot of pro days and individual workouts were canceled, including the University of Georgia's. But the pre-draft process is very intense, and so it's very difficult to get into the NFL. And
Hmm.
I think the only thing that is more difficult than getting into the NFL the first time is trying to get back in for a second time, because when you're out of the loop, there are more new guys coming in every year. You have a new set, a new draft class every year. You have new guys that make a team or maybe don't make a team, and there's just more guys added to the pool year after year. And so, maybe the only thing more difficult than getting in the first time is getting back in for a second time, and I'm experiencing that right now. Um, so I'm not going to be too picky with with who I would like to play for. Obviously, as a kicker, I think any specialist, really any kicker or punter, would say the same thing, that if they had their pick, they would pick to be somewhere indoors, someone that has a domed stadium. That way, you don't have to worry about any weather conditions for any of your, or at least for all of your home games.
Hmm.
Obviously the wind, the rain, extreme cold, all of those things can have a negative impact on your ability to perform as a specialist. So if I got to choose, I would pick somewhere indoors, but beggars can't be choosers. So I'll go anywhere that someone wants to give me a chance.
Yeah. And you kicked for the Battlehawks last year, right, in the UFL, had a really
Mhm.
good season with them. I also know, and I've seen you make these videos, you replicate NFL kicks. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's just a weekly series that I have done on my social media the last couple years. I started it in the 2024 NFL season, and
Hmm.
that year I basically would look at all the box scores across the league on a weekly basis and pick out the single best kicking performance from one kicker on that weekend. And so I think back to week one of the 2024 season, Chris Boswell went 6 for 6 on field goals, and I think he had 3 kicks from 50 plus with a long of 57. So a performance like that, when you look at all the kicking performances across the league, that one stood out to me as definitively the best performance of the week. So I would go out during my training. I would go out and, do my normal kicking session for that day. And then when I was done, I would go and try and replicate that performance. And I would kick all of the kicks that were made in that game by that kicker
Mm-hmm.
in the same order they kicked them from all of the same locations on the field, the respective hash, left, right, or middle, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
case may be. And I would also take time in between kicks just so I can't get in a rhythm, or get in a flow, so to speak. So I would do my kick.
Yeah.
I would move my tripod over to the next spot, move the camera to the next spot, and I would run off to the sideline for 3 or 4 minutes and pass the time just so I can't just get in a flow, because you don't do that in a game. You don't get to kick all of your kicks right in a row. You're going to have downtime in
Mm-hmm.
between. So I tried to replicate all the best performances on a weekly basis. Sometimes it would be a combination of 2 guys in one game, but for the most part, it would be one guy's performance that I felt like was worthy of trying to replicate each week. And so I
Yeah.
did that for the 2024 season. This past year, I decided to modify it a little bit. Coming off of the success that I had in the UFL, I felt like I had proved I was accurate enough to kick in the
Yeah.
NFL, obviously. And so the big question mark that I think any teams have had about me during my career has been leg strength. And so I said, well,
Mm-hmm.
let me modify my series a little bit to try to, showcase my leg strength. And so this past year, I tried to recreate the top 3 longest made field goals every week across the league. And so it was a way that I could show off my leg strength. We had more 60-plus yard field goals made this past season than in any season previously in NFL history.
Yeah.
And so I ended up recreating every single one of them at one point or another during the season. So it was a really good way to challenge myself, try and showcase myself, showcase that I'm still kicking at a high level to NFL teams that are interested. And then the other benefit to it is the fact that I get to bring positive attention to kickers who are doing really well. I think that
Yeah.
football fans, we all know that, kickers can come under a lot of scrutiny when they're not doing well. There's a lot of pressure that goes into being a professional kicker. And unfortunately, you can be the scapegoat if you're not necessarily doing so well. And so I wanted to use this series as a way to bring positive attention to all of the guys who are kicking at a high level. And I try and call every guy out by name in my weekly
Mm-hmm.
series to be like, hey, this guy's kicking really well. He just made a 65-yarder this week. Hey, Cameron Little just set the NFL record, 68-yarder this week. And so it's a way that,
Incredible.
I feel like I can help the specialist community by bringing more positive attention to what we're doing.
Yeah. What kind of feedback have you received from doing those kicking sessions? Have you received pretty positive feedback?
Yeah. There's always going to be a little bit of negativity. There's always going to be the people that say, oh, I bet you can't do this in a game, even though I
Mm-hmm.
just kicked in the UFL for 11 weeks and made 95% of my kicks. You're always
Yeah.
going to have the people that want to come in and, bring the negativity. But for the most part, it's very positive, where people are very encouraging. They're like, hey, keep up the good work. We see you putting in the work. Surely the NFL teams are out there watching. And I have gotten confirmation on more than one occasion directly from NFL personnel that they are watching my videos on a weekly basis, where they have someone in their scouting department who, will watch my kicks and then show them to coaches or general manager, whatever the case may be, to make sure that they're keeping tabs on me. So I do know that the videos are being seen by people in NFL buildings, and that's all I could hope for, just to continue to advertise myself. But yeah, the reception for the most part has been really positive. So it's really nice to see that.
And Rodrigo, you alluded to this a minute ago, but the evolution of kickers over the years is really remarkable. I mean, I remember, 12, 15 years ago, a 50-yard field goal was amazing. And then it was 55. And now you got Brandon Aubrey and Cam Little kicking 65-yard field goals like it's nothing. So talk a little bit about the evolution of the kicker. And I guess if there's a kicker in the NFL that you try to emulate your game after, who would that be?
Yeah. So kicking has definitely evolved over the last, 15, 20 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
Guys are, getting more and more accurate year after year, where, basically the standard now is we expect you to make, 97% 98% of your extra points on a yearly basis. Like you could maybe get one miss and no one's going to think twice about it. And, the expectation is more or less you're going to make 100% of your kicks inside of 50. And then from 50 plus, it's really like 65%. You're going to be expected to make about 2 out of every 3 that you try from 50 plus. And, 20 years ago, that was, unthinkable that, guys across the board would be that good. And so, I think it speaks to just the natural evolution of kickers, as we have seen with a lot of other positions. Quarterbacks are throwing the ball further than they ever have and more accurately than they ever have. Guys are running faster than they ever have before. Xavier Worthy just recently broke the NFL combine record for fastest 40-yard dash. And we've had vertical jump records broken, broad jump records broken, all this stuff. Just athletes are evolving, and that continues with the specialists, where now punters are kicking the ball higher and further. Field goal kickers are kicking the ball further. And so it's crazy to see. Like you said, Cam Little, he set the NFL record twice this year, broke the previous NFL record at 66 yards twice. He made a 67 and 68-yard field goal this year. Brandon Aubrey, I believe, made 4 kicks or he has the record for most 60-plus yard field goals in a career now. I think I can't remember how many he has, but I think he's got like 6 from 60-plus or something like that. It's something crazy.
Yeah.
And
he was just in the UFL a few years ago, right?
Exactly. I think this is going to be his 3rd or 4th year in the NFL. And, he has made a splash very quickly and established himself as one of the best guys in the league. And he just got a big contract as well with the Dallas Cowboys. I believe he just signed an extension for like $7 million a year. So he's being rewarded for, the incredible stuff that he's been able to do on a weekly basis. So it's been really cool to see the evolution. In terms of who I would look at or model myself after, I think that growing up, it was always Adam Vinatieri. Just the model of consistency for so many years. I think he has the longest career in NFL history, at least as a kicker. I think 23 or 24 seasons. Just a model of consistency, both in New England and in Indianapolis, and also being one of the most clutch kickers in NFL history. It seemed like he always came through and made the game winner. He may not have made all of his kicks all the time. I think his career percentage is around 83, 84%, which is still really good. But it seemed like he always made the kicks when it counted. End of the half, end of the game tying, go ahead field goal, whatever the case may be. So I think he's someone that I would like to try and emulate, and hopefully I can get back to the league and establish myself and get to hit a few more kicks like Vinny did.
Yeah. And Rod, from a gameplay perspective, your measurables are pretty clear cut. I mean, you 95% last year kicking. You post the videos, you show off your leg strength. So the tangibles are pretty clear cut. If you were talking to a scout or a GM and they said, what kind of intangibles do you bring to a team? How would you answer that question?
I would just say that I'm a great teammate. And I think that, over the course of my career, if you asked other guys, who I have interacted with, who I've been teammates with, they would say the same thing, that I'm just a great teammate. I'm going to do whatever I can to help the team win, whether that be on the field or off the field. I'm going to go out and try and make all my kicks. I'm going to go out and get good grades in school and help our team GPA. If guys need help understanding the game plan, I'm going to try and do that to the best of my abilities. As long as I have a great understanding of the game plan, I'm going to try and help other guys. Something that I did pretty frequently at the University of Georgia was help out some of our other players who are not necessarily specialists, be able to understand the game plan, understand the scheme that we were trying to implement for that week, because all of us specialists sit in on all phases of special teams meetings. And so we understand, even just as a field goal kicker, well, I know the punt and punt return game plan. I know the kickoff and kick return game plan. And so if guys are struggling to understand that because they have lots of other offense and defense responsibilities, then I'm going to try and offer my services and say, hey, this is what you got. This is the game plan. This is the guy you're blocking, or this is the guy that you're going to be assigned to look after when we get out there. And, so I'm going to try and help everybody so that our team can be the best that it can be. So I like to think that I'm just going to be a great teammate. I think back to my time in Tampa Bay in the preseason in 2023, and the starting long snapper at the time, Zach Trinner, was having a little bit of trouble with his punt snaps. And so I said, hey, Zach, maybe consider making this little tweak and see what happens. And so he makes the adjustment and he starts throwing rockets back there. He's like, Rod, thank you so
Hmm.
much. I've been in a funk for weeks coming into training camp, and I feel like a whole new snapper now. And so just little things like that, even though I'm not necessarily doing anything directly that you can measure in terms of he's making his kicks. Well, I just helped our long snapper to get a little bit better, and that's going to help the whole team with being a more consistent snapper. That's going to help our punt unit, our field goal unit. So boom, the team gets better that way. So I would just like to think that I'm a great teammate and I can be a great addition to any locker room.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said earlier, obviously you're beloved by the UGA fan base, but you were also beloved by your peers and teammates as well. There's no doubt about that. And adding that element to a culture is a big part of having a successful team. I firmly believe that you were one of the foundational pieces in that culture building that Kirby implemented those first few years. I mean, you and Roquan and Sony and Chubb, I mean, those guys were the foundational pieces that set the standard at UGA and made it what it is today.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Rod, kind of to close out, obviously as an athlete, we all have to get off the train at some point. The career ends, and hopefully for you, that's not anytime soon. I hope you still have a lot of ball left to play. But at some point, we all have to get off the train. And when your career as a football player ends, what do you see yourself doing? I know you alluded to journalism. Do you see yourself maybe getting into coaching or recruiting at some point, or do you like sports media? Where do you see yourself down the line?
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of two places, could potentially be both at one point or
Mhm.
another. Sports media is definitely one of those avenues. I would love to be in, sports journalism and sports broadcast. I think that the guys on College Game Day are, that's like the coolest job in the world.
It
getting
is.
getting to travel all across the country and experience new places on a weekly basis, and then you get to go, fly somewhere else and get to be in a booth and broadcast the game. I think that that is such a cool job. I would love to do something of that sort, or maybe be an analyst on, on First Take or NFL Live. I think that the NFL Live
Hmm.
crew is great, and so, something to that effect. I would love to do sports media at some point. I also am really big into coaching. I'm doing a little bit of coaching right now here in Birmingham. I help out with my kicking coach, who I've worked with for a long time, with one-on-one kicking, and so I help run, kicking camps twice a month, and I do some private lessons as well. But I also think that I could see myself potentially being a special teams coordinator, something to that effect. I think that I could be a coach beyond just specialists. Um,
Hmm.
and so there's always, those things are always kind of pulling, they're equally yoked, or I definitely could see myself doing either of those and being, very interested in pursuing either of those. Kind of like I had mentioned earlier, doing the Dawg Nation pregame and postgame show. I did that for
Hmm.
all of our games during the 2025 season, did it for G Day. And so I've been trying to work my muscles a little bit on the sports
Yeah.
media side of things. Also trying to just network in any opportunities that I can. We obviously had College Game Day and SEC Network come to Athens last year, and so
Hmm.
I was able to kind of get to go behind the scenes and go backstage and get to network with a lot of the analysts on both of those shows last year.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to work my muscles in both of those fields so that I can be as prepared as possible to dive in whenever it's time for that.
Yeah. I've always said working on game day would just be the dream job. That would be incredible.
Yeah.
That would be hard to beat. So we've talked a lot about Rodrigo, the player and the kicker, but tell us a little bit about you behind the scenes. What do you like to do in your free time? I heard through the grapevine that you love Legos. Tell us a little bit about what kind of hobbies you have behind the scenes.
Yeah, so there is definitely a hobbyist side of me, a collector side of me. I have a second Instagram account that is completely dedicated to all of my hobbies and interests. I'm a big
Nice.
into Lego, big into Transformers, Star Wars, Marvel, and sneakers. Those are all things that I am very interested in, all things that I collect, in some capacity or another. I've got a collection room filled with display cases full of all kinds of that stuff. And so I have a lot of fun with that. It's a great way to kind of take my mind off of football. Obviously, football is very demanding and very taxing mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so you need an escape from that. And so a lot of the stuff that I collect is a great way for me to escape that, especially with the building component to Lego. It's a good
Yeah.
way to pass time, and it's a good way for me to direct my focus on something that is not putting the ball between the uprights 24/7. So, a big collector, big hobbyist, a big nerd, for a lot of stuff. And so it's a great way to, just a great thing to have when you're not playing football.
Yeah. And people don't understand, but as a professional athlete, and I don't understand obviously because I'm not there, but as a professional athlete, there's so many pressures you face, both externally, but also internally too. A lot of pressure you put on yourself. And so I imagine you've got to have some outlets, you've got to have some ways to decompress and get your mind off the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Rod, lastly, I know right now you told me you're kicking with the Battlehawks this year, or did you move to another team?
No, so I am currently a free agent. I kicked
Okay.
with the Battlehawks last season,
Yeah.
and the UFL had to do a draft this year, which they hadn't done in the previous 3 or 4 off seasons. But they had a lot of moving parts. They had 3 new franchises. They shut down 3 franchises, opened 3 new ones in new cities. I believe they had 4 new head coaches out of 8. So 50% of the league had, was new head coaches. And so with all of this the new league owner opted to have a draft and make sure that everybody could start on equal footing and
Hmm.
start from the ground up. And so I was drafted by the Birmingham Stallions team, but was released, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
I am trying to keep the door open for signing with an NFL team at some point in the spring. And
Yeah.
so that is the route that I have decided to go. If a UFL team did call me at some point during the season, it's definitely something that I would need to consider. It would be a way that I could get back in the game and, try and advertise myself for a few weeks and potentially gain some interest going into preseason camp. But I'm very hopeful and very optimistic that ultimately I will sign with an NFL team at some point during the spring.
Yeah.
Most teams are going to start reporting for camp next week after the draft. And so hopefully, over the next 2 months or so, we'll get the ball rolling on that front and I'll land somewhere to be able to compete for a job next fall.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt you have the ability, and I know you have a lot to add to a team beyond the X's and O's. So a lot of people pulling for you, man. Really hope you land with an NFL team this year.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I hope so too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Rod, thank you so much for the time today, man. I know you're busy and have a lot going on. I really appreciate you sparing some time to jump on with me, and great talking to you. We'll catch up again soon, I'm sure, and go Dogs.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you too. And thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much.
No problem.